Welcome back to Information Operation. We're proud to have General Michael Flynn with us today, and he's going to discuss, at our request, some geopolitical 30,000-foot views of what's happening around the world, because a lot of it is very confusing. Welcome to the show, sir.
Appreciate it, Todd. It's great to see you again, and appreciate everything that you are out there talking about these days, especially the audience that you have, on this kind of a Veterans Week, Veterans Month maybe. Coming into Veterans Day, there's a lot going on in the world. And anybody that served our country or continues to serve our country, and particularly in the military, I'm always honored to talk to that kind of a group of people.
Well, thank you very much. And I'm sure you'll be well received. So, look, there's a lot of confusion going on. Ukraine was, in my opinion, pushed for the wrong reasons. The U.S. military seems to be fighting to the last Ukrainian in Ukraine, and now the chickens are coming home to roost. A lot of I think the average age of the Ukrainian soldiers now is 43. I was told this morning they're pulling people below 18 to go into the ranks because there's just not that many people left to fight. And then you have what's happening in Gaza, which to me is interesting and needs to be delved into exactly how it started. What are your thoughts on this overall general situation we find ourselves in?
Well, God, where do you start? The Ukrainian, so the European problem goes back to the collapse of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War, and the conversation and, frankly, the decision-making done by, I think it was Thatcher, Bush, Gorbachev, and Mitterrand, I think, or maybe it was... I forget the German chancellor at the time, 1992, I believe. When
maybe Kohl. I don't remember. Yeah, maybe Kohl.
Yeah, it may be Kohl. But at the time, they agreed that there would not be any further expansion of NATO, and there was also some talk about potentially Russia becoming part of that alliance. Maybe not necessarily a direct partner, but certainly, to have some sort of partnership role. And in fact, the United States of America, because I participated in these things, we had this thing called Partners for Peace, right? Which were exchanges of military to military exchanges. We had, the 82nd Airborne Division doing airborne operations over in Ukraine. We had all kinds of, sort of things that we called peace dividends, right? And now here we are, fast forward, whatever that is now, 30-something years later. And we're at the tail end of what is a continuing losing war, okay? So the war in Ukraine didn't start a couple of years ago. The war in Ukraine really, if you really want to put a fine point on it, it started at the end of the Cold War, okay? With the incursion, I think at that time we had probably 16 countries in NATO, and now we have, I don't even know what the number is today. It's probably 27, 28 maybe. And you're now abutting up to the Russian Federation. So decisions that were made by nations, by leaders of nations at that time in the early 90s have all been violated. Okay, that's number one. Number two, in 2014, right after the Sochi Olympics, the Russians attacked, while President Obama was the president, the Russians attacked the two eastern Donbasses in Crimea because they saw enormous weakness in the United States of America. We were so tied down in places like Afghanistan, Iraq, and elsewhere on the global war on terror, and we were not succeeding in those at all at that time. So Russia and under Putin took the advantage to jump into those two eastern Donbasses and Crimea, and then all of a sudden you have a guy like Trump comes on the scene. He's able to okay, we're not going to continue with this. We're going to show some strength here. And he did some things that showed that there was a consequence for an action. And he did it not necessarily in Eastern Europe, but he did it in other parts of the world where when he demonstrated that there was a consequence for a negative behavior, that makes the world leaders take a step back. And now we come back into another administration, and another administration immediately demonstrates weakness, not just with the surrender and retreat in Afghanistan, going on 2.5 years now, almost 2.5 years, right? August, I guess
Right.
it was 2 years. So the amount of weakness that we have demonstrated, that's why we have the problems that we have in Ukraine. Now, the war in Ukraine, I've been talking about this from the beginning. Now, even in 2014, where some of the issues I got into while I was still in uniform at the Defense Intelligence Agency, this is a loser, and it's always been a loser. And unless we want to go to a World War, III in Europe, it has been a loser from the beginning. And we have been saying that. There have been those of us that have been standing our ground and saying that. And guess what? Guess what, Todd? It's a loser.
You're right.
It's a total loser. We have spent enormous resources that we don't have. We don't, the Ukrainian military and the Ukrainian political leadership, they're frankly fascists. They've shut down all journalists, all the independent journalists over there. They've shut down the churches, and they're basically fighting what I would say is a sort of a strategic defense, if you want to put a military term on it. That has been a loser from the beginning. There has been no victories by the Ukrainian military from the beginning, and Russia has been able to maintain essentially what Putin stated at the very beginning in a couple of years ago, where he said this is a war of limited objectives. And those limited objectives were to basically hold on to what he had and to demonstrate that we are not going to put up with this guy named Zelensky. Now, all that said, I think one of the things that we're going to find out, I actually think that we're going to find out that Putin and Zelensky have been working together. Now, this is total speculation. I don't have any evidence of this. I'm just, as in my analytic brain, and as I have put my feet into the boots of our enemies for many, many years, Todd, and try to imagine the kind of scenarios that I can imagine, because that's the world of certainly of a military intelligence officer, a good one, that I actually have a sense that Putin and Zelensky have been playing us like a cheap fiddle. And look at what we have done, right? Look at what we have provided. Look at the resources that we have invested, and look at what it has done to the United States of America. Right, we're in a much, much weakened position right now at home. Probably the weakest position we have been in, and definitely in my lifetime. And I think historically, I can't see something historically from the very beginning of our country where we have been in this kind of a weakened position, especially with the overemployment of resources overseas, the debt that we have, and all of the challenges that we have right here in the homeland with this illegal invasion and drug problems and crime and you name it. So all of those things aside, the war that has been taking place in Eastern Europe, principally in Ukraine, has been a loser from the beginning. We have never had, not once, we've never had this current president of the United States, Joe Biden, not once has he stood up and given a State of the Union and said, here are the 3 objectives that we are trying to achieve in Ukraine in order to defeat Russia. We've never heard that. We haven't had any definition of vital national security interest. We've never really had any clearly articulated objectives outlined as to what it is that we, and I mean clear objectives. I mean objectives that are achievable, winnable, and have some sort of end game, have some sort of end state. Right? We've never had that. If I'm mistaken, please let me know and let me know what they are.
You're right.
So
and we agree with you on Zelensky, by the way. We think Yermak is his closest, is probably his lover, but also is probably working for Russia. But go ahead.
Yeah, and so if we're right about that, Todd, if we're right that we're being played by in this very geostrategic, geopolitical game that Putin is actually a master at, for these kinds of things, because at the end of the day, if Putin is working and using Zelensky, and Zelensky is sort of his puppet, and they're working together to do what? What would be the goal that they would be trying to achieve? Well, what they would be trying to achieve is, let's continue to have the United States of America pouring good money after bad money. Let's continue to have them pay us, right? I mean, let's continue to have our gigantic yachts in Monaco that many oligarchs from Russia and Ukraine have sitting in the Bay of Monaco, and I'm telling you, I've seen them. That when you think about that kind of stuff, and so what is it doing? It's weakening the United States of America. Because now let's jump from there, Todd, and let's go to the Middle East. Right? Because now we're back in the Middle East, in a different way, with a different nature. The nature of this war is vastly different than the nature of the war that we had in Afghanistan or Iraq. Okay? Totally, totally different. And you have to always be very clear on what's the true nature of the war that you're in. You have to clearly define the various adversaries. You have to understand, the objectives of either side. You have to understand all the strengths and weaknesses and capabilities and capacity that you have. You have to think about all those types of things for the enemy that you have. You have to also look at everything. In this particular case, in the Middle East, you've got to go back in history, in culture, in attitudes, in the demographics, in the dynamics, and then, of course, the relationships that exist, right? Never mind, it's not just about, bad Iran, right? And the terrorist organization Hamas. There's a lot of things that have been playing out for many, many years. And frankly, I don't think that the Palestinian problem is Israelis' problem, is a Jewish problem. I think the Palestinian problem should be an Arab problem. I think the Palestinian problem ought to be Egypt's problem. It ought to be the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. It ought to be the Emir of Oman, the Emir of the UAE, Qatar, Yemen, et cetera, et cetera. Why is the Palestinian problem a Jewish problem? Why is it a state of Israel's problem? It should not be. The reason it is that way is because it is the one thing that the rest of the Arab world loves to have as kind of a throw some fuel on that fire. Let's keep pissing off the Israelis to the degree that we are, right? And now though, what has occurred and what we see, and this is because I do want to talk about the idea of having an objective of survival versus having an objective that is unimaginable to most Americans, which is an objective of this idea of, I'll just use the word religiosity, right? The idea of what radicalized Islamist ideology can actually portend for a military goal and a military objective. So what we're looking at now is we're looking at the nature of an enemy that's not just Hamas, some terrorist group, right? These are very sophisticated organizations with a lot of money,
well-funded by Qatar and others.
Well-funded, not just by Qatar, but by there's a lot of other people that fund them. There's money that comes out of the United States of America that flows into the Palestinian Liberation Organization, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. You've got Hezbollah. Hezbollah has, if you, for those in your audience that might have even been in the region, I was, in 2006 when an Israeli soldier was snatched from the northern zone checkpoint by Hezbollah at a check, basically a control point entering in and out of Israel. Soldier was snatched, and we almost went to big war there in 2006 timeframe. Well, one of the things that was discovered then was the scale of rocketry that was discovered in just a couple of places. So now we know that Hezbollah, under a very brutal and a very qualified leader by the name of Nasrallah, has upwards probably over 100,000 rockets. 100,000 rockets. So if Hezbollah wanted to, rain darkness over Israel and shut down or overwhelm, the Iron Dome concept of basically air defense security, they could do it. They could do it in a couple of hours. And if you had a coordinated effect, and this is where the coordination, where a country like Iran is able to coordinate this, because Iran does have a headquarters that is operating out of Damascus, out of Syria, and the Syrians, for those that understand it, it's not a great military, but they have a military, and they have I think it's called the Al-Aqsa Brigade, which is probably their best brigade. So they have about six essentially maneuver brigades, if you will. They're not like the 82nd Airborne Division or the 3rd Infantry Division, but they're not bad, and they know the terrain, right? They know the terrain there, and they certainly would fight in a different way because it's their homeland. So now you've got Hezbollah, you've got Hamas, you've got a couple of other organizations. You have these elements in Syria. You have a command and control element that is a Iranian-backed command and control element. You have leaders that are very, very well equipped with experience and knowledge. And one of the things that they discovered in 2006 when they fought Hezbollah in the north was they discovered that they had secure communications. They have a secure communications capability. So, we're not even sure if when we talk about the greatness of our National Security Agency, which is our big listening post in the sky, we're not sure if we're able to capture all of the communications. When people go, oh, well, our guys are so good, we're able to listen to everybody. Well, maybe not. Mm-hmm. So the war in the Middle East, where Israel is all about survival, okay? It's not just about defending the West Bank or defending the Southern Zone or defending the Golan Heights. It is about survival as a state. So that's Israel's, that's their ultimate goal. That's their sort of 100,000-foot level goal, that they have to survive as a state. And they are going to do everything that they can to survive as a state. But and they understand this, what they're facing, but 99.9% of Americans have no clue what I'm about to say. What they're facing is they're facing an enemy that doesn't have survival as a goal. In fact, survival is not something their idea about life is an anathema to the way we understand life, right? The consciousness that we have as Americans, never mind what the Israelis think. So we're talking about an enemy that sees death as a path to a different life. I mean, you're talking about an enemy, I always say, what would possess somebody to strap on a suicide bomb around their, suicide vest around themselves, and knowing that, it doesn't even take the cell phone or the clacker that they got to have the thing blow up. It could just blow up because they're so damn sensitive. So what kind of a mentality allows that? What kind of a mentality goes and brutalizes babies, children, beheads people? Nobody, Todd, is on tourist trips in Gaza or in Lebanon or in Damascus. People go on tourist trips all the time in Israel. Why? Because it's a democracy. It's a peaceful place. They want to have people come and visit the Holy Land, etc. And you do. If a guy like me or a guy like you went down into Gaza to go on, I want to go on a tourist trip down to the Gaza Strip, right? And I started walking down, Main Street, Gaza, you wouldn't make it out of there alive. You're the proverbial infidel. So the mindset of the two opposing sides in this case are completely different. And that means that the objectives and the use of force and the use of power have to be completely thought about differently. And so if we're pushing, which is happening right now, I listened to a little bit of Macron speech the other day, I guess it was yesterday or maybe it was the day before, where he's, now everybody's pushing for a peace talks, right? We got a ceasefire. We got to have a ceasefire. We're going to have peace talks. Well, if there's a ceasefire and declared, Israel lost. They've lost. So if there's a ceasefire, they've lost. Now I am, to back up even before my narrative or my missive on Ukraine, I am totally against war. I am against these endless wars, because guess what, America, and guess what, audience? We get an A+ for participating. We get an F- for winning. We have forgotten how to win wars. We haven't won a war since defeating the Nazis and the imperialist Japanese in World War II. We haven't not won a war yet, period. End of sentence. Don't tell me about tactical battles and every platoon has won this and Desert Storm, 100 hours. Those weren't wars. Those aren't wars that we're talking about now. We've been in 20 plus years of war in Iraq and Afghanistan, and we've lost them both. We now have the Iraqi government that we spent, I think, $6 or $7 trillion on. Afghanistan, we spent over $6 trillion. So we have the Iraqi government now in support of Hamas against the United States of America.
Working with Iran.
Working with Iran, and we have, I don't know how many attacks today. I haven't gotten the latest update, but whatever it was yesterday, it was like over 50 attacks against U.S. forces that are operating in principally in Iraq and parts of Syria. I don't know if we've had anybody killed in action yet, but we've had a lot of guys hurt. We've had a lot of people injured. I mean, it's like at a certain point in time, you say to yourself, wow, what is it that we are doing? And what is it that we're doing wrong? Well, the principal thing that we're doing wrong is we have the shittiest leadership that we could possibly have leading this country right now. I'm sorry. They're not incompetent. These are not stupid people, These are people that have, well educated, with all of their Ivy League, frankly, their Ivy League degrees that they can take. And as far as I'm concerned, they're nothing better than whatever you can find in the circular file these days, because of all the things that we've learned about the Ivy League and the nonsense that's going on in those schools. But we're talking about people in our State Department and our Department of Defense, frankly, in the National Security Council, in our intelligence community, who are actually more pro-Hamas and more pro-Palestine than they are pro-Israel. Okay? Now, I've been back and forth with a lot of Jewish friends in this country, in America, and you have to ask yourself, because there is a disconnect between the Jewish community in America, because there is a lot of the Jewish community. There's a fair number of the Jewish community in this country that is pro-left, pro-Democrat, right? And they're sort of pro-woke corporate world, right? All that. And then you have the other element, the other side that is sort of the conservative side that is clearly pro-Israel. So the Jewish community, which is it's a small percentage-wise for the greater numbers that we have in this country. But when you start to look at it, you say to yourself, okay, why would they be anything but pro the state of Israel? Why would they not be for the survival of the state of Israel? And it's, so there's this, I don't know, it's a form of, and what the right word is, like dyslexia or something that's in this country right now, particularly in that demographic. And I think that the country suffers from because of that, because many of them are in places like in the White House, in our diplomatic corps, in our military, that have influence and decision-making influence for sure. And so when I think about what's happening globally, because we haven't even really talked, I don't think I even said China once yet, and China's the bigger problem. China's the bigger sort of bear in the room, so to speak. But when we are making the decisions that we're making, if the decision is to go to a ceasefire, which would clearly maybe stop the bloodshed, Israel loses, and Israel will find itself in a much more difficult place if they go to a ceasefire. Although I guess, and I've seen in the last 24, 48 hours, there are now anti-Netanyahu rallies in Israel. And that's not a good sign. It's not a good sign, because if the outcome is Israel loses, then that's not good for the greater good of humanity globally. I'll leave it at that, because there's second, third, fourth order effects that will play out if they, in fact, suffer a major loss, a major defeat.
Let me ask you this on Netanyahu. I mean, he's a questionable figure, and I think you have to, in my opinion, bifurcate Netanyahu in Israel, because he's made some, I think, poor decisions on the vaccine issue, on supporting President Trump, and this recent security incident on the 7th, really doesn't make any sense to me. And so I think he has to bear some responsibility for that. When he does that is up in the air, but I don't think that was a natural, just an accidental breach with, bulldozers and hours and hours and hours of preparation and movement into that area, and they didn't see that. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I was asked, what happened on the 7th, right? So that later that day, a couple hours after, I went on with another show, and I said at that time, and it was speculation, and it's still a bit speculative on my part. I said a couple of things. One, and they haven't been disproven yet. So the first thing that Netanyahu should have done was fired his Southern Zone commander, and he should have relieved or fired the Israeli Defense Force, basically the Secretary of Defense, right? Yeah. The IDF chief. He should have fired them both immediately, and whoever was the seconds, bring them up, because that breach of their security. And I have been in the towers on the Gaza. I have been in the town of Idirat, which is basically a little town on the corner. You know, when you look at the map there. Right. I've been in Ashkelon. I've walked the streets of Ashkelon. I've been at the border control points there, where I've stood, you know, with the Israeli soldiers there in those spots, and I've been through the surveillance capability of the Israeli Defense Forces in that area, and I've done it up in the northern zone and you know, along the southern border of Lebanon, and I've also been in the same setup up on the Golan Heights to learn lessons, to look at their capabilities. I've been in and out of Israel a lot, you know, more than probably a couple of dozen times, all in the military. Never been to Israel as a civilian, I guess, or as a non-government person. So all that said, the only way that breach occurred is if there was a stand-down order, meaning stay home, go away, no security, no fire watch, nothing, right? No fire guards at the doors, right? Nothing for a period of time from about probably 2 o'clock in the morning until about 8 o'clock, 6 hours later, 8 o'clock in the morning. There had to have been literally nobody home.
Right. Nobody watching the monitors. Nobody. Yeah,
the only way that could have happened, because in a security zone that you have down there in the southern zone of Israel, you have layers of security. You have not only the electronic and the surveillance, the technical side of the security layer, but you also have the physical side, and you actually have civilians down there that are part of that, right? I mean, it's the town of Ashkelon, which is a busy place. So in order for them to come in and breach what they did and then hold terrain and do the kinds of things that they did in the towns surrounding the southern part of Israel, in order for them to do that, I mean, there literally could not have been any military awake at that time. It blew me away that happened. So I said that day that he needed to fire those two gentlemen immediately to send a message, and maybe later on, if he found out that it was some Southern Zone commander at a lower level that made those decisions, okay, then reinstate those guys and you bring that person up on charges. But there was such a breach, and now that it's not a 6-day war, and it doesn't look like Israel's going to do what they always done in 67 and 73, and the way everybody's always touted the Israeli intelligence, Israeli military they've always been able to do all these things. They were able to shoot all these missiles out of the sky that are flying in from Saddam way back in the Desert Shield, Desert Storm timeframe, or Israel, or Iran, or some of the missiles that have been fired from Yemen, or some of the stuff that's been fired from Hezbollah, over the years. This is different. This is vastly, vastly different, folks. And the nature of this war this is a much more conventional war. There is a component of information that clearly is winning the day for Israel's adversary, and frankly for our adversary right here in the United States of America, where we've got massive rallies showing up in the streets of America all over this country. We are talking about, I don't know how true it is, but we're talking about, days of rage, and we've got threats from leaders over in the Middle East and different Arab countries that frankly we've been pouring money into for a long time. So yeah. I want people to understand, and really particularly your audience, because I think that you have a great way of carrying a great discussion about foreign policy, intel, and defense, and all the kinds of issues that we deal with. And you got a great audience that follows you and listens to you. this is a different time that we have ever faced. When somebody goes, well, we've been through this, our Revolutionary War, our Civil War, World War I, World War II. No, there's no precedent for the period of history that we are in right now. None, zero. Okay, we've been challenged before by different elements in our time. And when I say our time, the history of this country. But now we're in a place where the information component of our war that we are facing, particularly here at home, is almost the dominant weapon system. It's like the dominant capability. And we don't know what to believe, right? We don't know whether
true.
If I see something online, I see a video of, I don't know, President Macron of France talking. I don't know whether it's artificial intelligence or whether it's him. Until somebody finally says, oh yeah, no, that was actually him. I mean, and then whoever says that, you kind of go, well, do I believe you? So it's the whole thing. So the information component is a weapon system that is expanded in role and in capacity and capability. The use of physical weapons to be able to do the things that they need to do in order to dominate physically, the state of Israel, which is something where if I was on their side, if I was on the adversary side, right? So again, you're hearing from a guy that always had to put my feet into the boots of our enemies as I briefed our operators on what they should expect, most likely, most probable, most dangerous courses of action. This is the way that I think. So if I was on their side and I was Iran, I would sit there and I would say, you know what? There's no better time than now to do what we want to do, because the United States of America is in the weakest position it's ever been in. They are overstretched in Europe, and they're still, we've poured resources into Europe. We've poured resources into NATO. We've lost upwards of $14 trillion in just the last 20 years in two countries, Iraq and Afghanistan. We're printing money like it's going out of style. We have a border invasion that's going on where we've had upwards of 10 million people come into our country. We can't control our own damn streets. We are in a very weakened position. I don't give a shit what the elections outcome were yesterday, which if you want to talk about those, we can talk about those too. But if I were in Iran's shoes, if I was in their leadership shoes right now, I would say there's no better time than to let's get Israel off the map right now. So Hezbollah, Hamas, PIJ, Assad in Syria, let's put as much pressure as we can physically, because if they go to a ceasefire, one of the ways if you go to a ceasefire is you want to be in a really, really strong position if a ceasefire is finally called. You don't want to be with your heels on on your heels. You want to be on your toes, leaning forward in a very strong stance where you're ready to say, hey, we hold all the cards, right? And that's the position that I see happening right now. And these nations that are calling for a ceasefire, guess what? They're not on Israel's side in this. They're on the Palestinian side. They're on this this two-state solution nonsense that has been espoused for a while now, right? And so who does this all benefit? Because I do want to mention China. This all benefits China, period. Okay, end of sentence. The Chinese One Belt initiative, their One Belt, One Road initiative that they've had going on for the better part of 2+ decades now. China holds they hold like 80% of the world's ports right now. They are based out of 80% of the world's best ports. China has, if they want, they have control of the Panama Canal. China has trade agreements with 75% of the nation states around the world, which equates to almost 75 to 80% of the world's population. China, not the United States, where they are the lead trade partner. Hell, they're the lead trade partner with us. And the United States of America, when I just think about the goddamn fentanyl problem, never mind cocaine, methamphetamine, and all the other drugs that are on our streets where our cops have their hands tied behind their back because of this craziness called defund the police, which actually, that phrase defund the police comes out of the Bolshevik Revolution of the 1920s.
Sure it does.
So
in Mao before that or after
we're talking
that,
about in the last year, just in the last year, we've got close to 200,000 killed in action on the streets of America from fentanyl alone. Killed in action, not wounded, not debilitated, killed in action, almost 200,000 in just the last year alone because of Chinese produced and imported through the Mexican drug cartel, and imported into this country through all these illegals. So
chemical weapons. Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So, does that? Because I'm not like, I don't want to be Debbie Downer, right? Because my life is I'm always kind of like one of these glass full kind of guys. But we have got to recognize the American people. I don't care whether you're Democrat, Republican. I've been both, right? I've been both. It doesn't really matter. What matters to me is whether or not this country, the United States of America, can survive. If our Constitution can survive the onslaught of socialism and communism that is, in fact, in the body of America, and it just, it didn't happen because Donald Trump showed up. It's been happening, Christ, for 50 years, if not 100, but definitely for a long, long time. What you needed, though, was an opportunity to be able to really grab hold of key leadership and key nodes of our system of government. And they have that. They definitely have that. And it was probably got exacerbated in the last 20, probably maybe 30 years with different presidents. And I look at some of them like, and people go, well, he's talking about Obama, or he's talking about Bill Clinton. I'm also talking about George Bush, okay?
Sure.
And some of the foolish decisions that we had, like the very horrific decision to go into Iraq when we went into Iraq, or for weapons of mass destruction. The very famous Colin Powell sitting with the CIA directors, sitting behind him at the United Nations and saying, we can't allow this basically to happen. We got to go get these weapons of mass destruction. That was a lie. That was a lie.
Yeah, it's all theater. It's all theater. Yeah.
So anyway, we have got to correct ourselves, and how we correct ourselves is we do it. And I do believe this, that we can correct it at the local level. That means that American citizens have to become citizens again. We have to stop being complacent, stop being lazy. Now, I will say about yesterday's outcome of the elections in the country, because there was 11 states or so that had various forms of elections. That the turnout, these are early numbers, because I look at this, I look at this stat, and these are early numbers, but the turnout, it looks like the turnout in the for the country, for all these elections that occurred yesterday, the turnout is less than 40%. In some places, It's less than 35%. That means registered voters on both sides, Democrats and Republicans primarily, those are the two main parties, but we're looking at that are registered to vote, that actually voted yesterday or voted in the mail-in ballot component of what happens now. It's around 35%. That we can't have a country, and that's been that way for a long time, Todd. And so if we have that, then all the things that are happening overseas, and all the negative things that I outlined that's happening here in this country, we only have ourselves to blame. Instead of bitching about those in Washington D.C. who, frankly, we voted for, we put them there. The governors, the state legislatures. If you don't show up to vote, because that's my first question when I do talk to a lot of people, I always say, "Did you vote? Where are you from?" I'm from Kentucky or Mississippi or whatever, or Florida. Where are you from? When was the last time you voted? Well, I don't vote because those bastards are all corrupt. Well, I kind of say to them, well, you know what then? I'm not going to take your question. How's that? Because you're not participating in this conversation because you don't participate as a citizen in this country. So anyway, that's kind of my. Let
me take you. I'm on the. I know you're a rec chairman in which county in Florida?
In Sarasota. I'm not the rec chairman. I'm on the Republican Executive Committee.
Okay, I'm on the Miami-Dade rec in Miami. So we have a real problem in Florida with just kind of an obfuscation from the statewide party from allowing exactly what you're saying to happen. So how do we fix that in the great state of Florida?
Well, I wish, when Ron DeSantis ran for governor, and he said, "I'm not going to worry about running for president. I'm going to be I'm going to be the best governor I can be." And then he gave that up, right? He lied. He basically lied. Okay, so maybe it wasn't intentional at the time, but now, Ron, it's a lie. So
it's pretty obvious.
we need leaders from the top, and the governor of a state, like the president of the United States. We only have one of those, right? And that executive power gives them a lot of authority to be able to do different things. The GOP chair for the state of Florida is a guy by the name of Ziegler. I've met him. I can't say that I know him well, but I've met him. And to me, he's a lot of talk. He's a lot of hot air. And he's somebody who could actually, to look at like Miami-Dade or look at Sarasota or some of the other counties that we have and say, hey, we got to fix these things. We have a lot of voting problems. We have a lot of election problems. I mean, we were talking here where I'm at. We were talking about the election county election commissioner here in Sarasota is now I guess he's the state rep for all the county, the 67 counties in Florida, election commissioner here, plural. And so there's a lot of things that we need to do to fix that. I wish that we could get a governor, and frankly, most states, that I wish we could get a governor that just decided to be a governor and didn't have somebody whisper in their ear once they've won the governorship and said, "Oh, you can be president. You can be president of the United States." Right. And then they stop, right? They stop and they stop being a leader for the state. If you're a really effective governor in a state, and I mean really, really effective, and you really hone in on the kinds of things that people care about, the grassroots issues, trust me, if you later on in your life you want to run for president, the people in your state will back you. The people in the state of Florida, they're not going to back Ron DeSantis for president.
No, he's destroyed his career.
He's destroyed it. He destroyed it the night that he announced for presidency, because a lot of people in this state went, well, wait a second, I thought you were going to be our governor. Now you're up in New Hampshire and Iowa, and guess what? We have the mayor of Jacksonville now is now a Democrat. Was a Republican. This is only a couple of months ago. The voter turnout for that election, if I remember the number right, it was like 20% voter turnout. And I don't think Ron DeSantis went up there one time to champion for the Republican running for mayor. So guess what? You lost. And now Jacksonville's a great city, and there's stuff like that.
Speaking of Ziegler, my group of us filed a 40-page grievance in March, and we haven't even gotten an email yet saying they received it. So it's a big problem with the RPOF. We can talk about that another time. And you've given me 45 minutes, so I really appreciate it. And thank you, General, and hope to see you around the great state of Florida.
Yeah, I appreciate you reaching out, Todd, and thanks to you and your audience, your great audience. And I wish everybody a upcoming happy Veterans Day, and for all the veterans and all those serving in our armed forces. We really do appreciate everything that you do and the sacrifices that you give on a daily basis. So God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Take care.
My name is General Mike Flynn, and I want everyone to know that I stand fully behind Beverly Hills Precious Metals and its owner, Andrew Sorcini. We are facing one of the greatest periods of financial uncertainty in both American and world history, and so now is the time to organize your finances. With the advent of the BRICS pay system, we need to now seriously consider how we can take better care of ourselves and our families and start some serious decision making when it comes to our wealth. You can also ask about their newest 2-ounce coin of yours truly. It's an absolutely great gift, and I am deeply honored to be part of history, as well as helping people protect their finances, their wealth, and their investments. So visit gold.generalflynn.com. Tell them the General sent you. Thank you so very much. God bless you, and God bless America.